And see if you can take these words of refuge to heart. I take refuge in wisdom, compassion, and non-clinging awareness. I take refuge in the full richness of here. I take refuge in the ever-present immediacy of now. Truth is all-pervading. It is the suchness of this moment, the thusness that you are. My refuge is to live within the truth. Without departing from this space of contemplation, invite yourself to contemplate your aspiration for this exploration that we're about to embark on. What are you yearning for? What are you moving towards? What is important in your life? Whenever you contemplate aspiration or intent, you might have a feeling of you being wherever you are and the intent being something in front. Right? It's like out there. And imagine for a moment that the space between you and that aspiration is diminishing. And just explore the possibility of just falling open. That your cells fall open, your sense doors fall open, your mind falls open. another verse of refuge. We take refuge in love and clear seeing. We live courageously in this world of birthing and dying. Our hearts embrace all companions on this path of lucidity and freedom. For the sake of all beings, wisdom, compassion, non-clinging awareness. I received a number of comments and suggestions to do with the format of these classes. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. And one of the offerings was a suggestion that perhaps the classes were a bit too long. And then another suggestion was that the classes were perhaps just perfectly right. So we have a kind of, I'm going to try and support everybody. But I am going to make a heroic attempt, and for those of you that have known me for a long time, you'll realize that this is truly a heroic and maybe mission impossible attempt to see if I can have the classes be approximately an hour and a half and no longer. And that way we maybe have a kind of a meeting place for the people who think it's just right and the people who think it's too long. Today I'd like to just introduce a few ideas concerning our general kind of topic. Okay? And it's really an expression of my aspiration, is that we might somehow explore together. I don't mean we're all in the same room and we're doing some kind of groupy thing, but I mean in a sense that we are all engaging in this general theme of exploration, an exploration of a blossoming of sublime understanding and love. And I need to make a few kind of negative statements as well. And that is that, so one of them is this, right? It would be very useful, but I think it's going to be very difficult for some of you to not think of this as an exploration of the sadhana of Amitabha. Right? I'm particularly not that interested in exploring the sadhana of Amitabha. Boy, right? What I'm interested in is exploring the mystery of living that I find myself totally engaged in. Right? And if you think about your living, you know, you see, in a sense, we live as, I mean, it's a poetic image, but as a kind of cresting wave of now. Right? There's a kind of a nowness. The thenness, the yesterday, is gone. You can't. It's a concept. It has very real power and so on, it seems, in our living, but it's a concept that's happening now. Right? And tomorrow is a concept that's happening now. Right? And this is like a beginning point to enter into what we call unbroken wholeness, or the pure land, or the sadhana of Amitabha, right? The Buddha Amitabha. Buddha is like budding, blossoming. It's a blossoming. It's an ongoing Buddha, and it's joyful. It's blissful. It's a joyful blossoming, right, of sublime understanding, right, of recognizing that, like, everything that we experience, right, is an arising of relationships in action, happening now. I realize this is terribly general and kind of vague and so on, and it's a bit difficult. Like, what do I do with this? But please, I'm trying to make the ground, right, of where this study might be, right? It's the full richness of here, and I don't mean here in this room. I mean here. I mean here. I mean here. And when you get up from the room or wherever you are, and you go about your life, whatever the next thing is, right? That is happening at that now, and now, and now, and now. And that kind of famous Sufi saying that I constantly quote, kind of hopefully not ad nauseum, right? That no matter how fast you run or how hard you dig your heels in, you can't get away from your own 2 feet. And this is really truly worth experimenting with. And in fact, at deeper, more refined, subtle levels of meditation in the Mahamudra and Dzogchen traditions, you'll be directed to look directly into this and try and explore the possibility of getting away from your own 2 feet. Because you have to become absolutely confident that no matter how fast you run and how hard you dig your heels in, you can't get away from your own 2 feet. No matter how fast you run or how hard you dig your heels in, you can't get away from this cresting wave of now. And yet when you think about it, we are continuously concerned about what will happen in the future. And we're continually bothered by what has happened in the past. And not only that, but we wrap around this bothering and this disturbance with kind of things like fear and anxiety and jealousy and pride and kind of regret and all kinds of extraordinary, amazing adornments. Right? You imagine you're a kind of an absolute ungraspable cresting wave of now. There's kind of nothing there, but everything there. And then particularly in the tradition of the natural great perfection, which is really the full translation of Dzogchen, right? Natural great perfection, right? They talk about all experiences arising as adornments. You know, it's almost like the deity just sits there, like the emperor with no clothes. Right? The emperor, you know, the story of the emperor's new clothes, right? And the child says, oh, the emperor has no clothes, right? And we kind of look into this cresting wave of now, and you say, well, show it to me. Show it to who? Like, it's sort of ineffable, right? And yet it seems undeniable. It's where we are. We're kind of stuck with it. Right? And when you recognize that actually you don't, in the cresting wave of now, in this moment of nowness, this ability to embrace, right, with our body, speech, and mind, with our emotions and our feelings and our conceptualizing and so on, to embrace this fullness, this present dynamic that's taking place, right? We don't have to fear that it won't happen, because it is happening. It's pointless to be regretting that it's happening, it just is happening, right? There's a whole lot of falling away of what traditionally are seen as problems and defilements, right? In simply entering into this place of unbroken wholeness. This is I mean, you know, it's not kind of a invented word or anything, but for me, I track it back to David Bohm, right? There's this feeling of there's an unbroken wholeness, right? And within that, it involves that embraces everything. And in a sense, our practice together, our exploration together, is going to be seeing if we can find ways of supporting our capacity to embrace this unbroken wholeness of sublime understanding. And why do we call it sublime understanding? You know, why not just understanding? Big understanding. And quite often we think of understanding as like understanding things, you know what I mean? Bits of information, understanding how things work, being clear about that. But then when we look into this, whatever the thing is, we see that big things are composed of little things, right? Big fleas have little fleas upon their backs to bite them, small fleas have smaller fleas, and so ad infinitum. Right? So if we look carefully into it, it becomes, people say, yeah, but it's like a rabbit hole. You know, you go down the rabbit hole and you get kind of totally lost, so I'd rather not. So it's actually safer not to look. Right? But that doesn't work either, because you get kind of bumped over. Right? And so when I say sublime understanding, we see an understanding which is capable of translucentizing, right, what's happening. It's in a sense like an increasing appreciation of myriad domains and dimensions of interrelatings, which are part and parcel of this ongoing dynamic cresting wave of now. I have to kind of dance it for you, right? Because it's like, it's not just words. It's living. My organism lives, and this sense of a profound oomph in our being to support everything possible to be able to live this truth more and more. Right? Sublime understanding, this kind of translucentizing understanding. And in that translucency we see there is no thing that we can grab with our attentiveness, because as soon as we attend to it, it reveals itself as a whole lot of other dynamics. Right? Sublime understanding and love. Right? And you think of love as, in a sense, the capacity, it's the kind of the feelings, the emotions, the physiological functioning that goes on in one's being when we accept the legitimacy of the totality of another being who is at that moment coexisting, right, engaging with ourselves. Right? It's like a huge, and actually there's not a big difference between like boundless love and boundless understanding. And sometimes Amitabha, traditionally, Amitabha is sometimes referred to as a Buddha of immeasurable light. It's a very traditional kind of, right, or boundless light. And light in Buddhist kind of ciphers, it's kind of secret language of Buddhism. Light is referring to understanding, clear seeing. It's like illumination. It's not, like when you say, do you understand? You could say, do you see what I mean? But I'm talking about some incredibly abstract, subtle concept, and I go, do you see what I mean? And you say, yeah, I see. You don't see anything with your eyes. You mean I understand, right? This is a sense of light everywhere, understanding everywhere. This side of my kneecap understands the other side of my kneecap. It's in relationship, right? We've got, our kind of flexors and extendors kind of thing, just at a muscular level, in a sense, like when my bicep tightens and shrinks and shortens, right? My other muscles lengthen. So it's sort of like there's a kind of, the muscles are kind of understanding, but there's relationship that's going on. Cells relating to other cells. This is just a kind of an introduction. We're going to be going into this in gruesome detail, right, as we plummet into this sadhana, this practice of sublime understanding and love. It happens to be a not unreasonable translation, a blossoming of sublime understanding and love isn't an unreasonable translation for Buddha Amitabha. But we can understand Amitabha Buddha, Buddha Amitabha, in a kind of a multitude of different ways, right? We could understand it. It's almost like three main facets, if you like. I've jotted down a few thoughts before I came because my old decaying brain, my ancient, feeble, gradually more and more demented person, right, forgets, and I get these brilliant ideas, right, and then it's what are, and then of course it just passes me by and it turns into a 2-hour class and I never got there. Right? 3 facets of Amitabha. And I think this is really important because within our group here, and there's a lot of people on the screen, I'm just saying to the people in the room, I don't know if everyone came or if the last I looked there was over 50 people signing up on the Zoom, so it's quite a lot of people. And let me just express something which it's a thought that's popped into my mind a number of times, and so I thought, well, I'm just going to express it now. But it's kind of heartening for me to kind of recognize people that I've known from Ottawa back in the 1970s. Right? There's a lot of connection. Right? This is where I first began to teach full time, and here we are, umpteen years later, right? And in our group that's here, we have a large range of experience in Buddhist study and practice, right? And we have some beings who this has been their life, and they are touching kind of very subtle, refined levels of practice, which is almost no practice. A practice which is just living, if they try and put it into words, it misses the point, but it's so profound and it's the most important thing in their life. And we probably have a few people who are very new, right? And it's a kind of not quite sure where they're going, and they don't have that kind of background. And I'm trying to speak to all of you, right? And so the nice thing about having 3 major facets, if you like, of Amitabha, is that you can choose your Amitabha you want to work with, right? You can choose take whatever Amitabha is most meaningful for you, right? So here's 3 facets. First facet is Amitabha as suchness. Okay? If you like, this is the Trikaya. This is the Dharmakaya, the Sambhogakaya, the Nirmanakaya, right? And the union of those 3. And we'll touch on these things in a lot more detail as we go into the sadhana, right? But there's a sense of suchness, this cresting wave of now, this ever fresh awareness, this naturally occurring ever fresh awareness that's just this, right? This is Amitabha. You don't have to, how can I put it? This is a facet, if you like, of Amitabha. At that stage, we don't even bother with Amitabha because Amitabha is just another conceptual adornment of something that's ineffable. And then the second facet is and oh, by the way, it's totally empty. It's ungraspable. It's inconceivable. It's the fruition, if you like, of Dzogchen and Mahamudra and essence Zen practice. It's Buddhahood, if you like. It's the full Monty. For those that would like to look at it this way. Then there's beings for whom Amitabha is not that in any meaningful way whatsoever. Amitabha is, get this, it's a concept. It's a thought. It's an image. It's an archetype, right? Which is kind of helping to, is whatever helps move us in the direction of deepening, clear seeing and love. Okay? So this is this kind of deepening, this direction, this whatever for you is like moving us in that way. This is Amitabha. And then you might say but it's a thought, it's an image, it's an archetype, it's I don't have a Tonka here for you, but people say, oh, what's Amitabha? Is a red Buddha who sits in the lotus and is surrounded by light and millions of other Buddhas. That's Amitabha. Amitabha is one of the 7 Dhyani Buddhas. It's a conceptual thing. And then the third level is Amitabha as actual manifestations of love and clear seeing in action. Okay? And so, I remember at one stage in my medical journeys recently, not that recently now, my medical journeys seem to have been going on for a long time, but I just finished 30 days of radiation therapy. It's quite a few years back now, and I kind of had this feeling of gratitude and support of all the people at the Kathleen Kilgore Center, the radiation clinic, and all the technicians and nurses and doctors and so on. And so I sent them a massive bouquet of flowers, and I wrote a poem and a card and everything to them. And then I described them as angels of precision and care, right? And there was a time when I came out of one of my general anesthetics at an operation, and I kind of didn't know where I was or what was going on, and I got caught up in some old pattern, and I was kind of fighting to breathe, and there was struggling going on, and the nurse in the recovery room, she leaned over me and she said, very commanding voice, "Tarchin, you're supposed to be a Buddhist. Breathe." And a big smile came on my face, and everything came together. I was totally settled, and I was totally there. And there was Amitabha came to me. That was Chenrezig came to me. That was an angel of mercy came to me. It was like this is like whenever there is an actual manifestation of love and clear seeing in action, we could say that's Amitabha. So cultivating Amitabha is cultivating that, right? Or cultivating Amitabha is kind of following and exploring the kind of conceptual understanding of interconnectedness and wholeness and so on is wonderful. And then exploring Amitabha is simply falling into the openness of suchness. Okay? So we've got different kinds of layers with this. I wanted to, by the way, I've got copies of the Sadhana here, and I would suggest to the people who are joining us through the Zoom that you print a copy of the latest kind of edition of the Amitabha Sadhana. If it's the one with a color picture, which Heather just showed me, that's not the edition that we're using. Right? The edition that we're using is a black and white one. I just put a black and white one up there because I thought it was easier for people to print. And there's a few just kind of refined changes if you want the text that I'll refer to. And for the people who are here, I've got copies that I'll give you. Let's just sit for a moment while we wait for a visit to the loo. When I said let's wait for a moment, let me offer you a challenge. I'd like you to. I'm doing this challenge too. I'm not as if I'm taking up the challenge too, of never waiting. I've given up. I'm not going to wait for anything anymore. Right? Because it's almost like waiting has this feeling it's very weighty, and it's like you put everything on hold while you wait for life to start up again. And yet, even while we were waiting, life was happening. Right? You don't have to wait for the cresting wave of now. It's absolutely unnecessary to wait. Right? But it might be necessary to catch yourself waiting. This is a really useful practice I've found. Right? I catch myself, Tarjan, you're waiting again. Right? And it feels heavy to wait. You know, different degrees. Sometimes waiting is very heavy. Right? Sometimes it's just lightweight waiting. Kind of mindless waiting. I just kind of push the button and my whole sense of existence just goes fuzz. And then we start again. Right? So we don't need to wait. Right? So let's continue as waves of now. Right? And I'd like to just speak a little bit about preparation, if you like, for engaging in this exploration. Right? Before we look at the text, which I'm really concerned that the text might actually take you away from the exploration. And you'll be studying the text and you'll say, what does that mean? And what does that represent? And what does that symbolize? And does this mean anything to me? And I don't see why I should do that. Or, oh, this is really great. Right? Only you're saying the text is really great instead of my living. Right? It's subtle. This is going to be so difficult to keep us all on track. So before we get to that, right, we'll do this preparation. We'll kind of consider the preparation, which hopefully will help us stay on track. Right? So this is a preparation for engaging in this sadhana for particular people. Now, some of you are going to leave now. You're going to, I'm not one of those particular people, so it doesn't apply to me. But there's kind of an assumption here that you are having some kind of interest. And so this is a preparation for yogis of the natural world and long-term practitioners of buddhadharma. When I say long-term practitioners of buddhadharma, I don't mean long-term practitioners of Buddhism dharma, although it's not excluding that. Right? Buddha dharma is the dharmas of budding, of blossoming, of continual. This cresting wave of now is a continual blossoming of that waveness. Right? You know, in an ocean, when you have a wave, and you say, oh yeah, it goes from here and then it goes to there. But it doesn't really. It's like the water molecules that make this wave are completely different from the water molecules that are making this wave. Right? Although you said the wave went from here to there. Right? It's kind of like spontaneously there. Right? And so this is like a budding, right? This is the dharmas of ever-fresh budding. So this is what I mean by long-term practitioners of buddhadharma, right? I mean, people who have been, for many, many years, they've been really like considering and exploring conceptually and meditatively and in action and, in every facet of their life, they're maturing in this practice, right? And then, just in case you feel like, well, it doesn't really, I haven't been doing this all that time, so it doesn't involve me. So then we save you by saying, this is also for yogis of the natural world, because we could say yogis of the cresting wave of now, right? In a sense, we grow out of and engage with an evolving biosphere, planet, cosmos it's happening, right? That we are on one hand in union with it, and on another hand we're raising the question of how can I be in union with this? In a sense we're all in a sense automatically blossoming. Right? I know you're blossoming because you look different than you did when the day you were born. You got hair. You're wearing clothes. Right? You got wrinkles. Right? There's you're different. Right? So there was something blossoming. Right? It's kind of there. And so we're all of us, we are yoked, we're linked to this blossoming. And a massive tragedy of the world is that we forget, or we don't recognize, or we don't acknowledge, or we don't value the blossoming that we are. And so in a sense we could say Dharma teaching is just simply to help us recognize and value the blossoming that we are. Does this make sense? It doesn't matter. If it doesn't make sense, you don't need to come back. It's okay. Okay? But this is the kind of the ground on which we're working. And against this, the sadhana I'm talking about the text now, can be deeply meaningful and deeply inspiring. But if we don't have this sense of being part of nature unfolding, at least some level of our being, either in aspiration to know it more deeply or confidence that it's happening, right? Then this probably isn't going to ring too many bells for you. So we could say it's a teaching for mature practitioners. It's not a teaching for people who are clinging to a belief in right answers, right method, and powerful instructions. Well, I said this is, I'm going to say what it's not. Are you, to what degree? It's people who are curious to explore. Right? And so there's two essential qualities, and this is very in line with Buddhist Dharma as well as Buddha Dharma, right? Two essential qualities of mature or maturing practitioners, right? Maybe you feel it's too pompous to think of yourself as a mature practitioner. But actually it's wonderful if you recognize, I can embrace this. There's a maturity in my practice. But at least I'm hoping that you could see you are a maturing practitioner, right? It's ongoing. Right? So two essential qualities, right, for mature or maturing practitioners. or yogis of the natural world. And I'd like to just read these, and then I'll make some comments, right? The first essential quality. This is going to put some of you right off, right? You're just running out of the room, right? Beginning with a deepening cognizance of the suffering of trying to make permanent that which is impermanent, right? Right? Starting with assuming that you've got this kind of deepening cognizance of suffering, of the suffering, right, of trying to make permanent, trying to freeze the cresting wave of now, right? Possibly, right, this deepening cognizance comes simply because you're getting old and you're kind of losing abilities and faculties and so on, right? Possibly it's because we're deeply dismayed about the state of human affairs in the world today, right? I mean, it's like, it's upsetting. So beginning with this, we begin to nurture a maturing sense of renunciation, a relinquishing of valuing or pursuing a life dominated by greed, hunger, hatred, fear, and delusion, withdrawal, alienation. And you just look at people today. They're worried about the cost of living. They're worried about their income. They're worried about whether or not we can have total control over Greenland, right, for our safety, right? They're angry about governments. They're angry about injustice. They're frustrated with kind of blindness to climate change. You see, this is a quite normal life, right? To have these kind of things. And these are, in a sense, qualities which seem to drive us. They're not just sort of vague qualities that sit there, like just adjectives or something, or adverbs that just kind of sit there and embellish something. They seem to have a power. You know, we get there and it's like, oomph. Huh? So when we talk about a maturing sense of renunciation, we're talking about a gradual, moving in the direction of relinquishing our valuing or pursuing a life dominated by these qualities. Okay? This is a quote actually from the translators of, and it's in the introduction to one of Longchenpa's texts, which is, the text was called Finding Rest in Meditation. It says, as an all-embracing ethical discipline that involves a profound reassessment of the personal relationships and attachments, the hopes and fears that make up the fabric of ordinary worldly life, renunciation is in fact incumbent on all Buddhist practitioners, whether clerics or lay people, and is indispensable, and the indispensable basis for any authentic and serious practice. Okay? I mean, you think of the time you really want to have a loving world, and therefore you spend your time being angry about what various politicians are doing. Actually, the way you get a loving world is by loving. Right? And, like being hungry and greedy for something which will now allow you to be the cresting wave of now. It immediately defeats itself. There's a kind of a genuine something in our being which is like a really deep-rooted it's like it's there, right? That we are clearly recognizing more and more readily that being caught up in these kind of emotional reactions, right, which are all tied up with trying to make permanent that which is impermanent, to try to control the universe, right, is a fool's errand. So, that's it. A relinquishing of valuing or pursuing a life dominated by greed, hunger, hatred, fear, delusion, withdrawal, alienation. But mature renunciation is not merely about what you are against. I'll renounce that, right? But mature renunciation is actually more truly about what you are for. Right? What are you devoted to? I really urge you to hold this question in a deep way until you can't wring any juice out of it anymore. Right? What are you actually devoted to? I came across the other day, we subscribe to an online magazine called Aeon. It's quite likely that many of you do too. And I sort of pulled a quote out of off that site a little while ago. I just thought it was kind of nice. And I unfortunately can't even remember exactly who it was from. Right? But it was about devotion. Right? Devotion is a form of attachment. Hey, I can do that. Right? Right? It's okay. We're still allowed to have a bit of attachment here. Devotion is a form of attachment that combines love or reverence with commitment and a willingness to endure. It orients a person towards something they regard as intrinsically worthwhile, something that gives shape to a life, even in the face of difficulty and doubt. And this, I know a lot of people, a lot of Westerners who meet with Buddhism, they don't like this renunciation business. That's kind of negative, it's so negative, we've got to learn to embrace everything. And they skip over that part. But they skip over it, they throw the baby out with the bathwater, because as they throw out mature renunciation, they throw out devotion. Right? This is essential. So let's consider this further. This is the first essential quality is recognizing that so much of the suffering that I experience, that the world experiences, is trying to, in a sense, make permanent that which is impermanent. It's like trying to kind of freeze the cresting wave of now, trying to get back to the golden age, trying to get back to New Zealand native forests in their original, our walking track. We go and walk up in the Kaimai every day, and there was this huge pine tree just on I think it was on the forestry land, big radiata pine, and it was a huge mature guy like this, and we'd park the car under the shade of the tree, so when you came back the car wasn't incredibly hot. Right? 3 days ago I went up there was no shade. Somebody chopped this monstrous tree down, right? And it's all part of trying to get back to native trees, you see, and so on, right? So we want to get back to, and I think, well, actually this obsession that we have in New Zealand with getting back to kind of native animals and so on, it's short-sighted, because the logical thing with this is to get rid of all human beings because they're relatively recent invasive species, right? And nobody's talking about doing that. So maybe actually, and we can't really get rid of them, the pine cones are in the ground, there'll be even more baby pine trees popping up all over the place. But what about learning to live well with the cresting wave of now that we find? This has got something to do with Amitabha in action. Right? Devotion is a form of attachment that combines love or reverence with commitment. Commitment and a willingness to endure. Right? Like, in other words, like I really, I'm committed to love and clear seeing. I'm committed to, in the natural flow of whatever's occurring, cultivating a continuity of profoundly nourishing ease, suffused with serene alertness. Oh! That guy with the drum kit across the road has just started up again. Right? Just, would you stop playing your drum? I'm trying to meditate on loving kindness and serene alertness. Right? And so, the kind of the commitment to endure, right, in a sense, is like, I'm going to stay with my practice even in the midst of these changing circumstances. Right? I mean, I've told this story a number of times, and Thich Nhat Hanh was once described as a cross between a Mack truck and a delicate flower. And I hadn't met him, and I didn't know much about him, and I thought it was a pretty corny expression by some American Zen Roshi, right? So I was blaming him to come up with a crazy thing like that. I'd understand it if he said a Bedford truck. But anyway, eventually I met him and realized that wow, it was a perfect description. It was like a cross between a big, huge truck and a powerful truck and a delicate flower. And I realized, though, I probably wouldn't have expressed it that way. I had my own kind of nutty way of expressing it. I said, like, Thai is someone who I saw who was dedicated to uncompromising loving kindness. And we sometimes think of loving kindness as means, you compromise and you kind of adapt and so on. And no, he was uncompromising loving kindness. You're with a person you truly and deeply love, and you uncompromisingly love them. And you're with a person who you don't particularly love, but you still flood them with uncompromising loving kindness. And all hell's broken loose, your passport's been taken from you, you're threatened with jail, you've lost your country, the bombs are raining down, and you say, loving kindness. Uncompromising loving kindness. Right? There's a kind of a oomph in there. And in actually, to this sadhana practice that we're looking at in Amitabha is uncompromising blossoming of sublime understanding and love, right? That gives us the kind of the strength to endure in the midst of all kinds of adversities. Later on, you actually benefit by having adversities because it kind of gives you a chance to real kind of edge to work on. I found that in my last few years. Now, to support this first essential quality, I want to make a suggestion to you, and you need to take this suggestion according to how useful it is for you. Right? If it's really useful, please take the suggestion. if it's not particularly useful because you have so internalized this and it's so part and parcel of your life that it's just there, like to kind of do this on a daily basis is kind of irrelevant. But I'd like to suggest to you that, at least for the duration of this practice, that you invite yourself very shortly after you wake up in the morning, right, to recite the 5 training precepts in positive expression. And you can, if you don't know what they are, you can find them in Daily Puja or some of the other books that I've written. And they go like this: however innumerable beings are, right? No, I will train myself to support and appreciate the lives of all living beings. I will live with a sensitive and responsible awareness for the whole ecology of life. First thing in the morning, reciting that until eventually you don't need to read it anymore. You know it by heart, right? I will train myself to dwell more and more in the mind of spontaneous generosity. Daily I will give material support, emotional support, and an example to others of awakening in action. These are things we can work with. We can work with it. This is what I'm working with. First thing in the morning, this is your adetana for the day. Right? I will train myself to use the senses to further awakening. Seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, tasting. Right? Right? To explore Dharma and to come to know the world more profoundly and more compassionately. Okay? Yeah. I will train myself through listening deeply and speaking truthfully to communicate in a skillful and compassionate manner. And finally, I will train myself to be ever more directly aware of how nutriment affects the mind and body. I will eat and drink and nurture myself and others in ways that support awakening. Okay? And just to, and you may find, when I say to recite them, you may not necessarily find any need to recite all 5 of them, right? You may find yourself going to one of them, or one part of one of them. But the point is that you are kind of reminding yourself of this kind of, there's a devotion to this way of living. This is Amitabha at the level of Sila. Okay? The last class on clear seeing, I talked about Sila, Samadhi, and Prajna. Right? So this is Sila, right? And these are, for any of you who are unfamiliar with these 5 training precepts in positive expression, is actually the rest of the title kind of thing, is because we also have the 5 training precepts in negative expression. Doesn't mean they're negative, but it's like train myself not to take the life of any living being, train myself to not take that which is not given, I train myself, and so on and so forth, right? Not to abuse the senses, to not to lie and so forth, wrong speech, and not to take intoxicants that cause intoxication to the point of heedlessness. That's the negative, but this is a positive. It's what am I devoted to? Yeah? So this is one thing that we can begin to work with. It's not particularly in the sadhana, but actually without this, there is no sadhana. This is absolutely fun. You don't have to meditate. Hey, you don't have to meditate. You don't have to study any text. You don't have to learn Sanskrit or Pali. You don't have to put your hands together and chant and have a shrine. You can just get up in the morning and do this. And gradually make it your own. The mature practitioner, these qualities are there that you kind of recognize. No, they're not things that are out there. This is just the way I live. It's what's important. It's what I value. So the second essential quality, because I said there's 2 essential qualities. That's the first essential quality, that devotion, that renunciation devotion. Okay? And the second one is a maturing awareness of the interbeing, interknowing nature of all phenomena. In Buddhist terms, this is a lived understanding of emptiness. These are two essential qualities, right? A deepening awareness, a maturing awareness, right? At the beginning, you just see, oh yeah, this is connected, my hip bone's connected to the thigh bone. That's the child's awareness of interbeing, right? Thigh bone's connected to the of the Lord, right? And so, and you're beginning to see, oh, it's kind of connected. And you gradually begin to see that when I close the door hard, it gets a big noise. And when I close the door gently, it gets a soft noise. I see there's a connectedness between doing this and that, right? There's an interbeingness that's taking place. And we will be, in the sadhana, we're diving really deeply into this, but this is just giving a kind of this is an introduction of the underpinnings, right? But Thai gave us the phrase interbeing, and I think that's fabulous. But as I've said a number of times more recently, that I felt it kind of useful to add to that. And don't just say interbeing, but interbeing, interknowing, right, as one word, right? Because it's in the interbeing we seem to be a study of ecology out there, like objects interacting, everything's dependent on everything else. But then somehow we go, well, yeah, but how did I know that? What about my mind? Somehow the knowing isn't connected with that. And yet it's gradually coming to see that, in a sense, everything is an expression of a certain knowing. That is what it is. Well, I don't want to try and go into this in detail now, but it's like the interknowing is not separate from the interbeing. Consciousness is, there's volumes of consciousness, cellular consciousness, if you like, organ consciousness, organism consciousness. There's even, the moon is conscious of the planet Earth through the gravitational field dynamic that's going on, right? If the dynamic between them changes, everything changes, right? So a kind of maturing. And to support this, right, to support this maturing experience of interbeing, interknowing, and the interknowing, interbeing nature. The nature of it is that it's ungraspable. That's the shunyata, that's the emptiness. But we'll find this as we go along. But to support this, you've got the first thing, to support the sila part, the devotion, the kind of, finding a place of calm presence in the midst of activity, right? Appreciating all life, being more generous, speaking truth, etc., etc. So to support a maturing awareness of the interbeing, interknowing nature of things, you need to have a daily period for what I'm going to call contemplative study. It's absolutely essential. You can't just get up in the morning and say, I'll be kind to everybody, and then forget it and off to work and just, that's not enough, right? There needs to be a kind of some, to do this subtly requires that we kind of look into it. It's thoughtful, it's contemplative, it's meditative. Right? So the question, of course, is what kind of contemplative study? Right? How do I, as a yogi of the natural world, or if you like, an apprentice of life and living, isn't that nice? Maybe you prefer that, right? You could call yourself an apprentice of life and living. This is like, it's kind of ongoing. Our apprenticeship never ends. A really good teacher knows that they're still learning, right? Apprenticeship doesn't end, right? So how do you, as an apprentice of life and living, relate to or engage with, this is a question each one of us needs to hold, these teachings, this practice, right? In other words, we're not going, like, forget about your life and try and understand and do what it says in the text. No, it's like you using the text is like a pair of glasses, and you put them on and you look through and engage with your life through that lens, right? But you don't stop engaging with your life, right? To spend my entire life just trying to understand these glasses, actually it could be very profound because it would connect to everything, right? But in a way, it's kind of silly. No, what do you mean? What about lunch? What about going to the beach? There's other things in life than just these glasses. There's other things in life than just this one little tiny sheaf of paper. Okay? All of this comes down to skillful means, right? How to enter or realize the here and now pure land, right? We talked about unbroken wholeness, Buddha Amitabha, and I said that we will also be looking at pure land teaching and so on. And in Buddhism, they're talking about the pure land is simply referring to that expanse of being, which is 100%. It's totally inclusive of everything. It's pure, no additives, no embellishments. It's just purely what it is, suchness, right? How to enter and realize this cresting wave of now. This is a question that you want to ask yourself, right? How to enter into and realize this nectar of naturalness. It's the title of my book, but it's referring to, right? Or how to enter and realize the blessing of pure and total presence. Shouldn't you ask these questions? No, don't ask me. Don't go and ask some guru or some teacher, or don't go and ask a text. How do you enter pure and total presence? You got to ask in your living. Don't even ask yourself. Ask your living. And then the trick, it's not the trick, it's the absolute necessary skill, is to be able to settle into a place that's kind of calm and clear and present, so that you can hear a response to your question, so that you can feel a response to your question, that the universe answers you. I'm looking down there because I put a clock down there. So I really haven't forgotten this hour and a half thing, and so in a minute it'll be up and I'll turn into a pumpkin, and the flow will stop. Right? Continue on. Right? So here are a few ways. It's almost like initially there's a progression. It doesn't mean you have to go through all these, but what it means is that you might find yourself somewhere on this progression, right? And that's where you work. So maybe you are working on, you want to enter the pure land. How do I realize the pure land, this cresting wave of now, this nectar of naturalness, this pure and total presence, right? Well, we could call this, it's a path. How do I walk this path of purification, right? It's like, and that is, then you should review Sila, Samadhi, and Prajna. And I talked about this in all kinds of different classes, and referred to it, I think, in our last session. So a yogi of the natural world, one who is free to ask questions, investigates living. This is what you do. You investigate living with your body, emotions, concepts, and understandings. Right? You go about this. You don't need to study a Buddhist text to do this. We're using your emotions, your concepts, your understandings, your physicality, right? Is one who is engaged in an ongoing question of questioning the moral validity of both what one is doing and the ecological validity of what one is doing. Right? It's like you're engaged in something and you're saying, well, within the human dimension, you're questioning what's the validity of this for me? How does this support, right? Increasing calm, wholesome relating, deepening attentiveness and engagement, and a kind of an opening up of understanding, sila, samadhi, and prajna. Right? In what ways does this not only questioning the moral validity of what you are doing at that moment, but questioning the moral validity of the ecological validity of what one is doing. Right? Like how does this fit for everyone around me and all the creatures and the plants in the garden and so forth? I'm trying to point to a kind of a deeper level of inquiry. Now, that could keep many of us busy for ages, right? And to support that, the sila part, if you like, is the whole dynamic of what enhances my sense of peace and well-being, physically, emotionally, mentally, so on. It's a massive thing. Could take us into all kinds of explorations, right? Samadhi is like, I call it a continuity of caring and inquiry, but it's usually translated as, it's often referred to, if you like, as meditation or concentration or attentiveness, right? And so it's like how do I enhance a capacity to be here for what's happening? And do it, like enhancing that capacity to be here. And then also the last one, prajna, which is kind of wisdom, or if you like, deepening understanding. Not necessarily yet sublime understanding, you haven't quite got there, which is still an understanding of things. But at least we're beginning to understand in a deeper sense the dynamic interbeingness of stuff. Right? It's there. And we find ourselves coming back to that. Some of you are younger than me, and some of you have to go out to work every day, and some of you are still raising, at a stage in your life where you're raising children and having family commitments and things like that. So, but some of you are kind of old geezers like me. You're kind of mostly retired. You're slowly falling apart. Nobody pays much attention to you anymore because you're just a babbling old geezer, right? And you got nothing to do. So you can kind of work on this all day long, right? So it may be that many times in the course of the day you find yourself spontaneously, part of going into and studying these texts and these prayers, if you like, and these aspirations, is that we can internalize these really useful hints that go, oh yeah, how did I forget? Thanks. You're supposed to be a Buddhist. Breathe. Thanks. Right? We need to somehow start to provide that angel. It doesn't have to be in the recovery room, the nurse in the recovery room. It can be an angel in your own mind, right? That somehow more frequently comes up, so that in the course of the day, many times, a kind of a subtle reminder, and you don't spend your time obsessing and polishing the reminder. That's not the thing. You follow the advice of the reminder. I didn't go, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be a Buddhist, I better do a puja. I didn't even go, okay, I'll breathe. I just breathed. And suddenly everything clicks, and what clicks into place is not so much a whole lot of remembering of technique and method and what I should be doing. What clicks into place is a familiar awakeness and interest in life and living that's happening. Thanks for reminding me. I forgot. Right? And we can be so busy trying to do a technique and practice a sadhana and finish 100,000 of this and doing this retreat and doing that retreat that we never remember, oh yeah, cresting wave of now. What on earth's going on? Okay. And there's some actual subtle exploration that can be done within this. But we need to get to that before the subtle exploration is available for us. And so in the support for Sila, Samadhi and Prajna, I mean, there's all kinds of, for some of you, you may find that this is really, oh, I've got to take this to heart and I need a little bit more guidance. What should I do? And there are, there's just unending resources of texts and teachings and so on that address these things. And so, but I'll draw attention to things that I've offered. And so, for example, the trilogy on mindfulness that I spoke about, I mentioned last class, this Nectar of Naturalness, many of my writings are going into detail. If you want to get your precepts together in positive expression, have a good foundation of exploring the settling using the breath, anapanasati, natural way to meditate. There's many, many things that we can do. And while you're doing that, the ideas of this sadhana can bubble through. But don't replace doing that if it's still valuable for you so that you can do this sadhana. That's a big mistake, because this sadhana is actually more pith, instruction, reminder, rather than any kind of detailed support. So that's one way. Another way of working with it, forget about that. That's no longer, I'm not that interested in that, I got that one. Okay, cultivating the art of resting in what is the foundation of mindfulness. Right? Awareness of body, awareness of feelings, awareness of states of mind, awareness of all phenomena. Right? It's just there. It's just there. This is a foundational thing. Right? Another one, right, is cultivating a unity of samatha vipassana. Right? Interbeing, interknowing, love and clear seeing. Right? Domains and dimensions of relational knowing. Right? This is what I'm working on. Right? This is juice for my meditation. I don't need a lot more instruction for this. I'm using my experience in breathing and yoga and all this to do this. Right? And finally, and then to bring all of these things together, supported by this sadhana of unbroken wholeness of sublime understanding and love. We got 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's outrageous if we don't get to the sadhana. We have to get to the sadhana, right? And the sadhana has a prologue, right? Which in a sense sets the scene. And for many of you, you've heard it many times before. I want to read through it, just through it quickly. I'm not going to go into detail. We'll go back to it next time we meet. And then I'll just make a tiny little comment on a couple of lines. Okay? And I'm going to edit it. You'll see that I've edited it when you get your own copy. Right? In the immeasurable expanse of nature in process, in faith and trust and wonderment, we give ourselves to this suchness, this seamless mystery of birthing, dying. Spacious, loving, with feet solid in the earth, We nurture the hints at blessedness, the myriad faces and masks of luminous knowing. Moving as this flow of compassion and deepening inquiry, we engage with all beings in ways that support the integrity, the beauty, and the stability of the entire field of life and living. Through making the intent of these verses a living experience, may the blessings of love and clear seeing presence, the unelaborated expanse of Buddha Amitabha, right? The love and clear seeing presence is the unelaborated expanse of Buddha Amitabha, right? May this blossom in the heart minds of all sentient beings, right? So this is the prologue to the text, right? And so I will just go back to the first verse. In the immeasurable expanse of nature in process, right? In the immeasurable, right? Everything that I experience right now is a kind of a collaboration of uncountable other things. The class is being affected by the sound of the rain, by the fact of the rain, by the humidity of the water, by the light, by the clouds contributing to the light, to each one of us and our lives. And without our mothers, we wouldn't be here. And without our fathers, we wouldn't be here. And without our uncles and aunts and problems and foibles and disabilities and exquisite talents, we wouldn't be here in the way that we are. Right? If you try to enunciate and enumerate all of what's going on, it's immeasurable. And if you were to even say, well, you can measure it by time, right? So you go, well, there's time. It was 1 hour. But then if you look in between the hours, there's minutes. And then you look at the minutes, and in between the minutes, there's seconds, right? And, in distance, in between the inch, or in the centimeter, there's millimeters. Right? In between, there's always like in-betweens, right? And in this sense, the universe is immeasurable, and especially because all of this perceived universe is arising in the knowing of someone. And there are infinite number of someones who are all interacting, bringing it's immeasurable, right? In the immeasurable expanse of nature in process. And quite frankly, and I'm sure some of you realize this, I mean, these verses come to my mind all the time. And probably more than 50% of the time, I don't get past the first line. I go, in the immeasurable expanse of nature in process. Thank you. And then what proceeds is a kind of spontaneous appreciation of this. Can you get a sense of this? Of nature in process. It's not Buddhist. Buddhists are nature in process. But nature in process is not Buddhist. Right? And it's not just a human thing. And it's not just a Republican thing. Or a Democrat thing, right? Or a lefty thing, or a righty thing, right? For a fascist thing or a socialist thing, right? This is. I was saying to someone the other day. This is the elephant in the room. Everyone thinks the elephant in the room is Donald Trump or fear about what America's doing today. It's not the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is climate change. It's all happening all around us. It's like absolutely invisible. It's nature in process, right? And does it have to be a problem? Or could it be simply the next extraordinary extravaganza of nature doing what it's always done? And we're engaging in it, and we're embracing this, and we're contributing as best we can. Right? And now I'm apologize because I'm not going to finish at the hour and a half. Right? I want to read you a poem, right? Because the immeasurable part, it's like if you try and look, there's always an in-between, like between you and me. Like if I want to measure how far away you are, right? I could walk halfway, right? And then I walk halfway again, and half the halfway, and then I walk half the halfway, I'll never get to you. Right? If I'm a mile away from something and I walk halfway there, right? And then I walk half of that half mile again, and then I walk half of that half, just keep on halving it, you never ever get there. It's immeasurable, right? Measurement is always by comparing one thing, which is constantly in flux and changing, with another thing, which is constantly in flux and changing. And relatively, within a functional frame of reference, yeah, you can measure things, right? But ultimately, suchness is immeasurable. So, like this in between, right? This is a poem that arose in 2006 at Wangapeka. I wish I could describe for you the space between the notes of the bellbird's song. The soft round explosion, the radiating glow, like the texture of the last moments of a long, easeful, colourful out-breath. Sound revealing the shapes of mountains and valleys and pine trees in the mist. The silver eyes filling in the gaps. I wish I could describe for you the feeling of wishing. A huge openness. A gentle, quivering fullness. A leaning into nowhere. A sense of something extraordinary. A reaching to connect. A mystery that already is. The single notes sculpt the space. Or is it space inviting forth the notes? Trillions and trillions of synaptic flowers, a meadow of knowing, a forest of caring, the vastness of mind birthing the poignant moment between the notes. Olive green feathers, light in the eye, describing for you the space of wonderment. In the immeasurable expanse of nature in process, in faith and trust and wonderment. And the word faith is this is not a translation, this is a poem that emerged years ago. But if we were to backwards translate it, in Sanskrit and Pali, the word that's often translated as faith is Sadhana. And but actually it also means confidence. It's like your faith, I'm confident this is going to happen, I have faith this is going to happen, right? So in confidence and trust, right? And trust is what's present when we no longer squirm in the fact of being vulnerable, right? There's a vulnerableness, like to be open and responding to the world means, in a sense, it implies a vulnerability, right? And when we're no longer like afraid of being vulnerable, we could say we have trust, right? If you don't trust someone, it's because you're feeling vulnerable. You're going to be, So in a sense, we're saying in the immeasurable expanse of nature and process, confident of the interbeingness, like this is worthy of deepening and embracing, in a willingness to risk vulnerability, and a kind of presence of wonderment, curiosity, reverence, amazement. We, all of me, we cells, we organs, all of me, I in my totality, we give ourselves to this suchness, this seamless mystery of birthing, dying, right? It's the cresting wave of now, right? It's like continuously cresting, continuously troughing, right? It's like the every birth is the end of something else. Every end of something is the beginning of something, right? Birthing, dying, right? And so in this kind of very real world, right? In the immeasurable expanse of nature and process, if you've got all those preparation things in place, and you're ready to kind of utilize this sadhana, right? You're going to cheat, of course. You're going to read ahead and read the whole sadhana before we get to the next class. I know you, right? But right in the immeasurable expanse, can you feel it now? In the immeasurable expanse of nature and process, breathing, feeling, tasting, touching, smelling, open, falling open. We give ourselves, we flex and bend, we give. We're not brittle to this suchness, this, we'll say, if you like, more about suchness later, but we'll have to leave it here today. This total field of all events and meanings, this totality, this unbroken wholeness, this seamless mystery of birthing, dying. And after the intensive care nurse in your own brain leans forward and says to you, whispers to you and says, remember this. And then you go, thank you. Right? And this is a blessing. Right? To be just there in the midst of your living, and somehow the remembering of this larger mystery blossoms in your being, and it's like there's a thank you, and then you don't start intellectualizing on the mystery. You mystery, you rest in that, and so this is a kind of an introduction to our study. We've scheduled, as you know, I think about 6 sessions, and I think it's highly unlikely that we will go through this text in 6 sessions, and so given my health and given your feeling of value and engagement, and if they come together in a magical and wonderful way, right, probably there'll be an extension, right, and we'll just keep going with this. And I think that's it for today. Right? It was a little bit better. May the day be well, and the night be well, and the midday hours bring happiness too. May both day and night always be well. By the blessing of the Triple Gem, may all be auspicious. Simon will go. So, people on Zoom, not that this is going to help, but that's the front cover. There's no picture, there's no color. It's been kind of slightly, there's been a number of edits and then refinements and polishings and so on, and this is the one we'll work on. And I suggest you get your own copy, because over the course of a while you might like to just refer to it and not have to look at a screen or electronic devices and stuff like that. Very helpful. And in one sense, I'm trying to speak in a very kind of universal and ordinary fashion, but in another sense, I'm also speaking from a grounding in buddhadharma, which is hugely colored by a grounding in Buddhist teaching. And I would like to offer you a possibility, which I know some of you already have ingrained in your being. It's quite ingrained for me. And please don't take this as a obligation or anything like that. But it's just a suggestion that you might treat this text as a sacred text. And that means that you don't just kind of throw it around or put a teacup on top of it and so on. And often I finish reading I'm talking about myself, because I study lots of texts and so on, and I finish a session of reading a text, and I close the text and touch on my head, put it down. You never, traditionally you never ever put the text on the floor, right? Because it's like, it's kind of like what people straight on and so on. So sometimes it's absolutely necessary to put it on the floor. So what I do is, like, in my mind I go, this is the floor is the ground of being, and down it goes. But I'm not putting it on the floor. You know what I mean? And there's a kind of, and I realize I've kind of internalized this. It's a bit of a quirky obsession, cultish obsession that I've developed. But I think that what it does is it also starts to put into your mind a kind of a set of values. So that even just to see the title can go, and already it's starting to kind of work on you. So there is value in a sense, treating the symbols, if you like, or the reminders with some kind of reverence, to keep it in a place that's special for you. That's all, right? So, may everyone be well, right? Thank you for joining us, and perhaps we'll see you in a month. Thank you.